future is digital, and banking is no exception. The banks of the future will look vastly different from what they are today, as banks need to cope up with a highly competitive environment, changing consumer expectations, and emerging technologies. So more and more banks are putting strategies in place to survive and thrive in the coming years. But what are these strategies and what are the solutions that they need? We will find out all that and more. Hello and welcome to Unplugged, brought to you by Dell Technologies and CNBC-TV18, and I'm your host, Ruchira Sharma. Over the years, the financial sector has undergone a massive transformation. So what are the key strategies that are defining the fintech sector? We will understand that with leading experts that we have on this very special show. We have with us Mr. Amol Pai, Chief Technology Officer, SBI. Thank you so much for joining us. And we also have with us Mr. Anand Ganapathy, Vice President and General Manager, Dell Technologies. Thank you so much for being with us today. And before we deep dive into the financial landscape and the changes that are happening in the country, what I'd like to ask both of you is, banking is a business of trust. So what has changed in the past few years? How can banks build newer models to, enable more trust and also foster economic growth for the country?
So banking continues to be a business of trust. I mean, that tagline doesn't change, and I don't foresee that changing at all. So in fact, whether it's an old bank or whether it's a new bank, they always talk about the money part is always secure with us. You can trust us about it. But what has essentially changed over the last few years is that there's one word which I would sum it up is technology. So now every company or every industry is some technology company in the business of something. So banks are essentially now becoming technology companies in the business of banking. And this is one of the biggest change that has happened in the banking industry. And this is of course going to be the biggest change that will happen in all the industries which are still in the curve of adopting technology.
Yes. All right. What about you, Mr. Anand? What is your insight over here?
So like Amol said, the fundamentals of what define banking haven't changed. It is a business of trust. And the technology, and he said it's now a technology business, but the technology that supports banking, the requirements of it also haven't changed, right? There was a time when it was a mainframe-based environment, and that changed to open architecture environments. But what banking needs in the form of resiliency, availability, security, data privacy, those haven't changed, because those are the fundamental tenets of the architecture which lead to a bank like SBI being able to provide that trust and that factor of trust to their consumers. So while things have changed in the way technology has evolved, but what technology provides as a backbone to banking hasn't changed.
So it has changed and yet it is the same. Great. So moving on to my next question, you both spoke about, banks of the future, how they have changed. So according to you, Mr. Amol, what are the key tenets that will enable this new reality for banks to prepare for the future?
So technology becomes center stage for just about any activity. And I'm not saying this because I am the Chief Technology Officer of State Bank of India, but that essentially is the key for a bank to grow. That essentially is the enabler for the bank to grow. So all the new concepts that are coming in in the technology space are going to be the key tenets of driving the bank. So it begins with how exactly you are sourcing the data, how exactly you are managing that particular data, and how you are utilizing it to derive new business models out of it. So this particular tenet, it is centered largely around data, and that will be one of the major and the key tenets around ensuring that banking keeps growing from here on.
All right. In fact, that was my next question to you. What role does data play in enabling this new reality for the new age banks or the banks of the future?
See, I think we need to step back. Data definitely plays a role, but if you look at what has happened to banking, the change that is happening in banking is not because of any other reason, but fundamentally our socio-economic situation changing, banks trying to attract and address very different customer base, banks trying to become more than just a place where you go and keep your money. They're trying to become more than that for people like you and me. So that's what's happened. And in that process, what banks have figured out is to be able to address these new markets, to be able to address newer business models. They need to rely on something to be able to help them make a decision. They need to be able to rely on data to be able to figure out what will work in the market, what will work with their customers, and what will work for their shareholders. So data definitely is the cornerstone of what is changing, but I think data is an enabler to a lot of new models, a lot of new ways of working, a lot of outreach that banking is doing. And take the example of what's happening with financial inclusion in our country. What UPI has done to enable digital payments is all enabled by data. There's a movement of data, and that's what's happening. So fundamentally, data is what's changed, but business models of banking are changing, and that's where we need to understand that importance of data.
All right. So you spoke about business models, and there is a definite need for banks to revisit their business models, put customer at the center of every strategy. So how do you decide what is the correct business model? What are your insights here?
So if you look historically at the way banking has progressed, correct? Earlier, the person used to visit a branch. So it required a visit for a person to the branch to get some activity done. Banks have always traditionally, or rather previously also a decade or two back, they have also tried to ensure that the bank can reach the customer. So that's where you have phone banking, ATM banking, correct? Sure. SMS-based banking all started off when the telephony revolution had just started. Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at it, it's a given now that there is always a connecting pipe between the customer and the bank, because telephone lines are easily available and handsets are available with everyone. So now it's a matter of how exactly the person's day-to-day activities or what he does in his life cycle or during his day gets captured, and basis that now events are getting created. Right. So this is an important driver in deciding the business model, that is there something that I as a bank can do to that person at that moment of time so as to enable a banking service to help that person move ahead. Like if a purchase has to be done by a person because it's more of a lifestyle need, he wants a bigger TV, but he has some X amount in his account, is there a way that I can give that person a top-up loan? So these are the new kind of business models that are getting created, wherein it helps the customer get better in life, and it is completely powered by a banking need at the bottom, and the business model is to ensure that you get to see what event that the person is going through and give some offer to that particular person.
What are the kind of business models that you think will work?
Now with the proliferation of newer connectivity methods, with more data being available, potentially with the 5G rollout, what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of data that's going to be available to banks or financial institutions. What our banks and financial institutions are going to be able to do is to use this live streaming data to be able to make decisions that are almost near real time, and also make those decisions as close to the consumer. If you are standing outside a McDonald's or outside some other outside a shop that sells TVs, your bank needs to be able to understand that you're standing there, understand your credit situation, understand the balance that you carry, and pull all of this together and try and process an offer for you which will enable you to fulfill your wish or your desire, not necessarily your need. So business models are going to be built around near real-time use of data, and technology is going to be able to power that. 5G, Edge, all of these technologies are going to help power this new business model.
Sure. And as you said, banks are increasingly looking for ways to monetize the large data that they have, give data-driven inputs. But what is the role of emerging technologies? Because, as you mentioned, banks are pulling out a page of Facebook, Google, and giving customers all that they possibly can need.
As more and more data becomes critical and potentially becomes the basis on which a bank is built, financial institutions will have to figure out how are they going to protect, manage, massage, store, and even archive this data for posterity, because there will be regulatory requirements, there will be data privacy requirements which will come into force, because everything about you and me as a consumer is now available with the bank, and they need to be careful about how they use it. They need to be careful that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, because it will affect your and my quality of life as people. So there is a lot to be done in the area of data security, privacy, and of course resiliency of data.
All right. So that is our next question. Whenever we talk about data, there is also talk about security. So banks, of course, are highly vulnerable. There are multiple touch points, and as banks go digital, there is even a greater threat when it comes to cyber attacks. So what is your insight here? How do you think banks can become cyber resilient going forward?
So I would say that banks are not vulnerable to any kind of security attacks or data leakages or something. I mean, the kind of mechanisms that are deployed in the banks to protect a customer's data, I mean, it is by far the best that you can even think of. So we don't rely on a single point of security saying that this customer's data is protected this way. So there are layers of security which take care of how exactly the data is ingested, how exactly the data is stored, who gets access to it, whether that person has got authority to even update that particular data, and finally, who gets to consume it. I can tell you for one thing that the bank, while they would want to always further their business, they are extremely risk averse whenever it comes to, so if there is a doubt, they will not progress ahead with that product. I mean, I can tell that with utter confidence. So, I can always tell you that your data is safe with the bank, and we are not necessarily looking at monetizing just about any and everything that you give to us as data. But having said that, I mean, we do deploy the best of the possible technologies to ensure that the data is secure at all points in time. In the event of a leakage also, there are checks and controls in place to ensure that the exfiltrated data makes no sense to anyone who gets a handle of it. I mean, you follow the full thing. I mean, you needn't worry about security of data at the bank.
But equally, just to add on, see, you can do 10 things right, but somebody else, the bad guys have to get it right just once, and therefore there is no point in time when you can say that you've done enough. There's always more that
can be done.
Financial institutions keep looking at doing to make sure everything is safe and secure.
So what are your thoughts on hyper-personalization? Everything is about the customer and personalizing, experiencing, deepening customer engagement. So how are you approaching this, and what are the factors that you think are driving this space?
Yeah. So just like the JAM, Jandhan, Aadhaar, Mobile Trinity, there is a new Trinity which is getting formed right now, and that is the 5G, IoT and the Edge Trinity. Okay, and that is going to change a lot of things for all of us. So 5G will essentially mean that data flies across the space pretty fast, right? IoT would mean that you just have to be passive. I mean, in the earlier days, you had to log into internet banking to create a footprint a digital footprint. But here you are sitting over here, your car is parked below over there, and it gives a complete identity of what temperature you are being seated, what type of air you are breathing, where are you based. It is like, now, because of IoT and 5G, the velocity and the volume of data is just going to keep growing in multiples. So you would not even know that you are generating these kind of events or these kind of data. And last, obviously, would be that what do you do with so much of data? That's where Edge comes into play, wherein you get the near real-time experience that we are talking about. So 5G, IoT and Edge Trinity is going to change a lot of things. That's point number one. What would bank do with it? Obviously, we are in the business of trust, correct? So I still have to ensure that the customer's data or the customer's balances are intact. I mean, all the products are as per the regulation, so on and so forth. But still, there is a big market out there which talks about this customer can be offered such and such cases. So that's where the entire concept of API related sandboxes or APIs being available to the fintechs comes into play, wherein I expose certain APIs to them and I say, please play with them and please give me an innovative product. And that's how my engagement with the fintechs and the players who are good at utilizing this particular data comes in. They come up with an innovative product. We know how exactly to engage with them, and that's how we can give a hyper-personalized product to the end customer.
Okay, he spoke of a few key things. He spoke about volume and velocity of data, and he spoke about fintechs and fintechs bringing in innovation. Now, when all of this comes together, it's not going to be one idea. There are going to be hundreds of ideas in the bank, right? And at any given point in time, there is no way to predict which of these ideas is going to, really become big and which of them may not make it. The banks have to now look at IT architectures that not only are available, resilient, secure, but very highly agile. Now, whether these are application architectures or infrastructure architectures or security architectures or data architectures, the new thought that's running in the bank is, how do I make sure that everything I do is extremely agile, but at the same time very highly available, secure and resilient, and at the same time I variabilize my costs, because there is no sense in investing a ton of money and effort into something that may or may not work.
Survive,
right?
yes.
So there is the concept of hybrid architectures that is coming in. You call it a hybrid cloud, call it private cloud, call it by whatever name you want. But the fact is, all financial institutions are looking at variabilizing what they do on the front of architectures, at the same time keeping them available and resilient to take care of this volume, velocity and innovation that's coming at them. And that's the challenge everyone's grappling with, and I think we're down a few steps in the journey. I think we have a long way to go.
So as banks go digital and they need to adopt cloud technology at scale, what are the kind of challenges and the solutions or the learnings that you have in that space? 5
to 7 years back, cloud was more about, it was a toy. It had to be explored, it had to be played with. But now it is mainstream. Every bank these days has got a strategy, if not an implementation on the cloud. So they will at least have a very clear roadmap to say that I have a private cloud strategy, I have a hybrid cloud strategy, and I have a public cloud strategy. Like, these are the three major types of clouds which are available, and every bank these days has got a strategy around it. What are the differentiators would essentially mean that even right now as we speak, the trust factor in the public cloud or the hybrid cloud is still getting matured. I wouldn't say we have wholeheartedly adopted it. There is always a concern about who gets access to the data and what happens to the data which lies on the cloud. So most of the banks generally try to build their entire application structure strategy around the private cloud. But the hybrid and the public cloud have got a lot of benefits to offer on the platter. And as long as you are completely aware of the way it can be used and the way the data is protected on it, banks will definitely start to explore it. I mean, some banks have gone a little bit step ahead because they felt that they are able to handle these kind of challenges better.
So as banks look at any of these cloud implementations, we strongly advocate that they look at how do you have one touch layer of management? How do you have a provisioning layer that spreads across all 3 or all 4 environments? How do I seamlessly move applications and data between these environments? How do I make sure I have copies of my data across any of the environments that I choose to have? How do I have my same security policies across every environment rolled out at the same point in time and not at different points in time? And that's what's critical. What's not critical is where you are. What's critical is, if you are everywhere, how are you everywhere in the same way?
But do you think banks are ready to meet the AI challenge? Because again, experts predict that if they use AI technologies at scale, they can increase their customer base, they can meet customer expectations. But are the banks ready to meet the challenge and address the gap?
So this space has matured a lot. I mean, maybe a decade or so back, everyone was trying to experiment and trying to figure out where to use AI and how to use AI. But over a period of time, the models related to AI have matured, wherein you very well know that if you want to do video KYC, these are the AI models that you should be using to enable end-to-end processing of a video KYC. So those models have very much matured, and over a period of time, people have also started to realize that you can't use AI to solve everything. Yes. Right? There has to be a purpose, there has to be an outcome to what you do. And this maturity is essentially helping the adoption of AI a lot better. You don't just start mumbling AI for just about every problem that you have got. And
that's true.
Yeah, and this is it. I mean, because of the maturity that has come into this entire AI space, I'm pretty sure it will get adopted a lot better from here on.
Sure. So just before we wrap up, closing comments from both of you, starting with you, Amol. What do you think is the one strategies that banks need to adopt as they, navigate and prepare for the future?
don't touch the core, but keep experimenting on the system of engagement. There is a lot that is happening on the space, especially as I told you, the trinity of 5G, IoT and edge. It's going to bring in a lot of new models. Keep that option open wherein the engagement model can be built, tried, tested and discarded if it doesn't suit your purpose. The trust factor retains on the core itself, and you just keep on this particular approach. That's my take on the future.
All right. And Mr. Anand, how do you think banks can leverage data to prepare for the future?
Listen, I'll go back to the first thing that he said. Banks are technology companies in the business of banking. And that means you've got to adopt innovation in every way that is available, every way that that possibly will be available, but hold on to the fact that you're in the business of banking and rely on the security, on the trust, on platforms that will allow you to deliver security, trust, resilience, availability, all the good things that each one of us, you and me, expect from a bank, but at the same time, deliver that one-on-one customer experience, the marketing to a power of one, that is available through the use of technology and innovation.
Sure. Thank you so much for this very insightful conversation. And as both our experts mentioned, banks of the future need to prepare and create a digital ecosystem that is agile, resilient, and future-proof to sail into the future and transform boldly. So that's it from all of us here. Thank you all for watching.